to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Tony Fisher, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the District Director of Athletics at Minneapolis Public Schools. Welcome to the podcast, Tony.
Thank you for having me, Hutch. I appreciate it.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience where you grew up, where you went to school, where you went to college, your first job, those types of things.
So I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Avid fan of the Packers, Badgers, Brewers, Bucks, you name it, anything that comes out of Wisconsin, I'm certainly a fan of it. Went to the University of Wisconsin River Falls, where I played basketball for 4 years, and a part of why I chose a Division III school, number one, it was far enough away from home where my parents couldn't just pop up and come see me, but at the same time, it was close enough if I needed to get home for whatever reason. But I also knew that I was going to play right away, and I actually played, average about 32 to 34 minutes freshman year all the way through. And that helped me to prioritize, I needed that chunk of time taken away from me. So then I only had a limited amount of time to complete, my homework and things of that nature, study and so forth. So kind of in and out.
I'm gonna interrupt you because I thought for a minute you were gonna say average 32 to 34 points a game, and I was gonna be really impressed. But no, continue on.
I'll tell you, my senior year though in high school, I averaged 26 a game with no left hand and no jump shot. So one game, I believe I shot 18 for 21 from the free throw line. So I was more of a downhill type of guard. But
that's impressive.
It had to change my style once I got to college. And, River Falls was in what I believe to be the best Division III conference in the country. At the time, Bo Ryan had won 3 out of 4 national championships during my time, from 95 to 99. So, Bo Ryan's a Hall of Fame coach, and Platteville they were a machine back then. But played 4 years, was able to go to college in and out 4 years, came back to Milwaukee. My first job that I landed was a small marketing research firm called Hamacher Resource Group. And I graduated with a marketing communications degree. So I was managing kind of a small graphic design / print shop, if you will. We had 2 high-speed color printers, 2 high-speed black and white printers. We had a couple of photo studios of which we were capturing product. And I had 4 graphic designers that reported to me. And so that photo studio, we did all the research behind products as they're placed on the shelf. So when you walk into a CVS or a Walmart or a Target, and let's just say you went into the health and beauty section, right? Those products are strategically placed on the shelf based on how they did in the market. And so first in, first out, the second you grab something off the shelf, our product was really analyzing how quickly you should put something back on the shelf so that you had a full inventory when folks were coming in and out to purchase those products. So that's what helped me with my marketing background and my graphic design background. And I would like to think that there are few individuals like myself in the athletic administration profession that are athletic directors with the combination of skills in graphic design, where I can ultimately, pick up a website and pick it apart just from playing with it, or, sketch out what, a logo should look like and so forth. And I'll just say this, and then I think we can move on to the next question, but most people don't know my time with the Florida Interscholastic Athletic Administration Board. I was the individual that actually rebranded that organization. So if you remember what their logo looked like prior to the new logo, that was my creative design. So I'm pretty proud of that work.
Well, so that's impressive. So let me get some questions from further on down the line and combine them. You're a Wisconsin man. I had no idea that you spent some time in Florida. So how many different states have you been in AD?
I've been an AD in 3 different states, and obviously that represents 3 different sections. And as far as schools, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 different schools if you count Minneapolis as a school district, 5 or 6 different landing spots.
So we're talking Florida, we're talking Minnesota and
And
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Yeah. So the journey is one where, and again, it falls in line with my philosophy. If most people who know me know my philosophy, I've always had the philosophy of having the greatest impact on the largest number of kids. And so when I first started as a coach, I really got into coaching once I graduated from Wisconsin River Falls. And in 2000, I started coaching at my alma mater, Milwaukee Lutheran, and my 2 younger brothers were coming up. And so I wanted to be a part of the maturation process, and I wanted to be a part of making sure they had a fair shot at playing varsity if they were varsity ready. If they weren't, I would at least be a part of the decision-making process. Little did I know that I was going to gain multiple brothers and multiple sisters in terms of coaching and being an athletic director. So my first AD job in Wisconsin, 330 students, primarily African American, probably 99%. Um, I then moved to Florida in 2010 and took a job at St. John Lutheran in Ocala, Florida, which is home of John Travolta and horse country. There's a lot of like horse shows and so forth that take place in Ocala. Um, and at St. John, the demographic was about 340 students, and it was primarily made up of rural Caucasian American students, so probably 90 to 94% Caucasian American, and then you had sprinkled in some other ethnicities. Um, Big City was calling my name after that. So after about 5 or 6 years at St. John Lutheran in Ocala, moved to Orlando and was the athletic director at Orlando Oak Ridge High School, which was just shy of 4,000 students. And the makeup of that demographic was 25% Haitian American, 25% Hispanic American, 25% Caucasian American, and 25% African American. So you could understand or appreciate some of the challenges that we may have faced just with the language barriers alone. Um, Left Oak Ridge and went to Orlando Edgewater, which again, that population was probably a little less than 3,000 students. Um, and that makeup was probably 40% Caucasian American, probably 25% African American, and then you had some other ethnicities sprinkled in there. And so now you get to Minneapolis and the demographic is, off the charts in terms of ethnicities. And I think all of those experiences kind of prepared me to handle or make decisions for the greater good of diverse population.
Yeah, I can understand. Let me ask you a question that I didn't send you. I know that with the church where I worship, they send missionaries out throughout the world, and I know in Minneapolis they have a mission there. This is called the Minneapolis Hmong mission, with the language they're speaking. So is that obviously one of the big ethnicities you're talking about, and a bunch of others, I assume.
Yes, yep, that is correct. It absolutely. Hmong is one. Hispanic American, Somali American. So we have a ton of different ethnicities represented in Minneapolis, and as I mentioned, I think all of those different stops prepared me for this moment. It's interesting how I'm a man of faith, so it's interesting how the Lord works, right? And
Yeah.
I think you take away one of those experiences, and I don't know that I'm as prepared in this position as I am, right? So all of those different destinations were for a reason, and I believe that I'm here for a reason because of all of those different, experiences and leading those athletic programs.
Fascinating. What was it made you decide then to leave Florida and then pack up for Minnesota?
Well, it was a twofold decision, and it really in no particular order. Um, number one, to have the opportunity to be the district director of athletics. I mean, again, I go back to my original statement of my philosophy, where having the greatest impact on the largest number of kids. I was then leaving a school-based athletic director job to become a district athletic director. So having impact on less than 4,000 kids and now having influence or impact on 30,000 plus, you know what I mean? So that played a role in it. And then I think the other part was with my family, majority of my family, when I say majority, probably like 97% is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then my wife's family is also from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Um, Again, it goes back to what I mentioned when I made the decision to attend the University of Wisconsin River Falls. Now our family is close enough where we can just pop up and visit them, but far enough away where they can't just pop up and visit us.
I like it. I like it. Let me have you, Tony, mention you've mentioned a few, but maybe some of the mentors and leaders in your life that have made a difference.
Well, the first one that really made a difference, there were actually two at a very young age. James Sinclair was my basketball coach dating back to fifth grade. And here I am, if you could imagine, we were the Bethlehem Lutheran Crusaders. Uh, our colors were purple, gold, and white. So I felt like, I was a Laker in the making, right? Um, I had the Kareem goggles with purple, gold, and white wristbands on both arms, knee pads on both knees,
I love it.
and then socks pulled all the way up so that you really couldn't even see any skin under the knee pad. And I'm a fifth grader on the seventh and eighth grade team. And for him to give me that opportunity was one that I never forgot. It just kind of, fed the appetite to want to be a solid basketball player. So I just remember those times where we had a medicine ball and I had to go. He made me partner with a kid that was at the time 6'2", probably 190, 200 pounds, something like that. He was a big kid. He was very athletic. And I had to do sliding chest passes with him from one end of the court down and back. Now, mind you, I'm a fifth grader and I'm no more than 60 pounds, right? And I have to do a chest pass back and forth with this big old guy. So it really prepared me for when I became a seventh and eighth grader. Um, I felt like, I felt confident enough because I was competing with some of those folks. And then I would add, there was a gentleman by the name of William Graham. He lived down the street from my grandmother's house. And I was 9 years old. He recruited me to play Little League Baseball. And so we would play in the alley with rocks and a broomstick. So you could imagine if you could hit a rock with a broomstick, you're probably a pretty solid baseball player, right? Or you got pretty good
Right.
hand-eye coordination, right? So he saw that. He told us, a couple of kids in the neighborhood, hey, don't go to the draft. There was a draft. You put your name in and then you would like do some skills and people, he said, don't show up to that. So he drafted me. And one of the lasting lessons that I learned from him. And to this day, I don't wear batting gloves when I played softball and so forth. I played softball at a pretty high level, slow pitch softball. But I was in ninth grade and I started at second base. Now, again, our team was mostly 11th and 12th graders or 11 and 12-year-olds. I'm starting at second base. We're in the Tournament of Champions. So this is the best teams in the entire state of Wisconsin playing at our little league field. It was a night game. Again, I got my wristbands. At this point, we were the Cubs, so you could imagine red, blue, and white wristbands all the way up the arm and so forth in our Cubs color. And I struck out. So as I'm walking, I got batting gloves on the whole nine. As I'm walking back to the dugout, now William Graham was a friend of my grandmother because he lived down the street from my grandmother. So when you talk about a village raising a kid, this best example, right? So as I'm coming back to the dugout, he says, and it was very loud and loud enough for just about everyone to hear. He said, all those batting gloves, what do you say, 100, all those expensive batting gloves and wristbands and can't hit a sack of ball. And from that moment, I said, okay, not only am I going to learn how to hit a ball, I'm going to learn how to hit on the other side, and I'm never going to wear batting gloves again. And so to this day, if I go out and play just recreation softball, no batting gloves will be used on my end.
Still hitting from both sides?
Yes. So in softball, I typically start off on the left side and I try to punch it down third base and beat it out. That was when I was fast. Um, and then I'll go on the right side and I'll move in the box and try to hit a line drive down the first baseline because at that point they think that I'm going to pull it. And then my third
Exactly.
at bat, I then bat right-handed and I pull the ball down third base because that's kind of my power alley. And then the fourth at bat, by that time, if I'm getting 4 at bats, because on my team I was the 10th hitter and played left center. So if I'm getting a fourth at bat, that means that we've got a lot of runs on the board.
That is awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Let me ask you a
Absolutely.
little bit of a personal question. Tony, what's the biggest failure or disappointment in your life, and what did you learn from it?
You know, I'll relate this to athletic administration, and I think, and this is a failure that happens often. We get caught up in doing the job because as athletes and now as athletic directors, we have been programmed to essentially get the job done, no matter what that is. The jack of all trades, or what is it called? Jack of all trades, master of none. Like I hate to
Mhm.
say that about us, but that's how we could be perceived, right? And so a failure of mine, I would say, is there was one instance I remember when we, meaning Oak Ridge High School, I was the athletic director, brand new. So, as I explained, I came from little old St. John of 330 students, rural private school, to now I'm at Orlando Oak Ridge High School, which is a large public school in a large urban, setting. Um, and I'm so busy working and making sure everything is going right. Lights are on, concession stand has what they need, to be successful and so forth. And I paused. And as I paused, before I go into why I paused, that team that year, our linebacker ended up going to Notre Dame. We had a slot receiver that went to Florida State. We had a football athlete that went to South Florida. We had an offensive lineman that went to Northern Illinois. So, a lot of kids that went to Florida Atlantic, like cornerbacks and so forth. So as I paused and I watched that crash, I literally was at, the where the ball was being hiked, and you see the offensive line, you see the defensive line. It was at that moment that I appreciated, like, wow, like I'm the athletic director at Orlando Oak Ridge High School with these kinds of athletes. My basketball team, he was a number 1 or number 2 shooting guard in the country at the time, and our team was ranked in the top 25. And I had an opportunity to watch him score 63 points against Taco Fall, you know, and just never really took the moment to appreciate, the opportunities that we've been given because we're programmed to just get things done and kind of make sure that everyone else is having a great experience, and we don't take the time to just kind of step back and say, like, wow, this is pretty cool. So if I had to speak to a failure, I would say, not really cherishing those moments. Like even with the NIAAA board, it goes so quickly, and I've served on the board. This is my last year now, so 3 years, has went like the blink of an eye, right? And when you look back on it, it's kind of like, wow, I really didn't take the opportunity to really cherish this experience because I was so caught up in trying to do the work and do the work at a high level, just never really took the time to appreciate, the moment, if you will.
That's well said. Let's have you talk now. You've been in AD for decades.
Yeah, this
How
is
is the job?
17 for me.
Yeah, how is the job different now than when you first began?
Um, I think that the technology piece, that's probably the first angle that I would attack here. Uh, you have to have some technical acumen about yourself to really be able to handle this job. You think about having to take pictures and post them on social media. When I first became an athletic director, that wasn't even a thing. Um, you have to enter all of your information into, an eligibility platform or something to that effect. Again, I remember writing our rosters down on a piece of paper and having to submit it that way. And now it's kind of all automated. Or, budget spreadsheets. I remember writing those on, a piece of paper, and then it transformed into being able to type it into a Word document and then into Google spreadsheet, or excuse me, not a Google spreadsheet, but an Excel spreadsheet. And now everything is done in, or can be done in Google or some type of specific accounting software that has all the formulas that you need and does all the calculations for you. So, I would just say that it has certainly migrated from, being less technical to technology driven, if you will.
Very good. Now, this next question, I've got to have to rephrase it.
Okay.
I was gonna ask you about how it was working with Minnesota legends, Craig Perry, Jamie Sherwood, Jim Baker, but now I'm gonna have to include, Andy Childs, Ron Balazs, and then probably some of the Wisconsin people, Greg Smith
Yeah.
up there and Jeff Sitz. So let's just throw them in together because, like I say, I'm pleased to learn you were in more than one state.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So talk about working with these legends in these different states and different sections.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to just a couple of names. So in my first stop with Jeff Sitz, now mind you, I mentioned I'm an alumnus of Milwaukee Lutheran.
Mm-hmm.
If you know where Jeff Sitz is at, and he's currently there, he's at Wisconsin Lutheran.
Yeah.
So there was like this little rivalry that we had with Wisconsin Lutheran because we are considered Missouri Synod and they were considered Wisconsin Synod Lutherans, right? So
Okay.
whenever we had an opportunity to play Wisconsin Lutheran, it was a big deal. And so when I became an athletic director in Wisconsin, he was like this untouchable, unapproachable figure, right? Like that's Jeff Sitz. Dude's been the AD at Wisconsin Lutheran for Lord knows how long, and he'll be the AD at Wisconsin Lutheran for Lord knows how long, right? So, and I was only an AD in Wisconsin for 3 years. So he was one of those individuals that was, just way off limits, if you will. Right up the street was Peggy. So Milwaukee Lutheran, literally
Okay.
right down the street is Divine Savior Holy Angel. And I dated a girl from Divine Savior Holy Angel. So again, didn't really know her like that until I became an athletic director. And again, she was one of those unapproachable, untouchable type of individuals. Like, man, like, you don't want to seem like you don't know what you're doing. So you don't go ask those individuals questions. You figure it out. Okay. Then when I moved to Florida, um, I don't know if you know the name Trish Hyland, but Trish Hyland was the district athletic director for, I believe, Orange County. If it wasn't Orange County, it was Lake County. But in our mentoring program there, she reached out to me. I just got this call. She reached out and she goes, "If you need anything, just let me know, and I'm going to be at your school within a week, and you need to give me a tour and talk to all the different things that you're doing as an athletic director." I'm like, I just got here, right? But she ended up being a valuable resource in terms of just kind of holding my hand and saying, "Whatever you need, I will certainly be here to support you." And then when I moved to Orlando, sitting in the room with, you know, uh, Russell Wombles, Andy
Mm-hmm.
Childs, Kevin Deemer, um, Jimbo Priest, Bobby Biaggi, um, and I know I'm forgetting Wanda Purdue. I'm forgetting a ton of folks. Doug Patterson. That room really helped the maturation process for me as an athletic administrator. And I think the beautiful thing about that experience with those individuals, while they were fierce competitors, right? They wanted their schools to be better than your school. There was no doubt about that. The room also helped one another to get your school to be the best that it could be, right? And so that really taught me, that there is a concept of healthy competition, if you will. So I became kind of the technical guy or the technology guy in the room. Russell Wombles is kind of that policy or bylaw, because he served as the FHSA president at one point in time. Andy Childs is really the one who knows all as it relates to the NIAAA and so forth. So you had your different levels of expertise, if you will. And then moving here to Minnesota, I really didn't get a chance to interact with Jim Baker and Craig Perry. That was minimal interactions as well. But Jamie Sherwood and Dan Johnson, those individuals
Mm-hmm.
were were very instrumental in, just kind of accepting me here in Minnesota and ultimately supporting me in terms of saying, hey, we think you'd be a great candidate to support not only our state, but the section. And so they were huge advocates for me putting my name in to ultimately land a seat on the NIAAA board.
And so let's follow up on that. And as a side note, I just love Dan Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
His sense of humor is so dry. I just
Yeah,
love hanging out with him.
Dan is he's definitely a piece of work, and I'm gonna go on record and say I challenged him in a game of golf this summer, and I have yet to hear back from him in terms of taking me up on that challenge. Now, the first time we went out to golf, I wasn't really into golf. This is only my second year of really being into it, but I put a lot of work in. I've gotten a whole lot better, and so I told him, hey, I want to go out and do a round with you again. So he creates this narrative that I'm scared to play him in pool, but really he's scared to play me in pool because that is my forte, right? Billiards is my thing. Couldn't get him on the table for billiards, and now he doesn't want to take me up on the challenge for golf. So I'm just going on record to say Dan Johnson is afraid to compete against Tony Fisher.
I love that. I am going to give it to him when I see him in Austin. Anyway, back to my question then. So obviously I know the answer and you know the answer, but our listeners may not. So to talk about your journey about how you came on the board, everyone knows you're either going as an at-large person from a region or it's your state's turn. So I want to talk about it from that angle. Let's have you explain to our listeners how that all happened for you.
Well, I think the journey in its totality is how I ended up a board member, right? I just speak to the experiences in Wisconsin and, building some relationships there with some of those athletic administrators and then moving to Florida. And obviously I spoke about the maturation process of my athletic administration career happening there and following, who I believe to be legends as it relates to, all the Florida ADs that you can speak to, like sitting alongside Ron Balaz. I mean, you're going to just gain knowledge just sitting next to him without him even opening his mouth, right? So in that regard, moving to Minnesota, I think once the Dan Johnsons and the Jamie Sherwoods of the world, and I'd even throw Mike Beck in there, kind of did some fact finding about, hey, this new guy, he's been around the block, but he certainly has, some credentials. And I would also speak to, at first when they asked who's interested in putting your name out there, I didn't put my name out because I was saying to myself, I'm too new. Like, I don't think that's appropriate since I just moved here, right? This was my second year, I believe. So I got here in 2018. 2019, I went to the section meeting. That was the spring of or summer of 2019. 20, we had the pandemic, and that was around the time. So really, I've only been in the section, if you will, for a year and some change, maybe 2 years at the most. So I didn't think it was appropriate because there's other people that have been in the section for Lord knows how long. And the Minnesota, veterans, if you will, said, no, you should put your name in. We think that, you're a good candidate and you'd represent us really well. And so I did, and, then had the opportunity to give an at-large speech in front of 2,000 plus athletic administrators at the national conference, and that was an experience in itself. I just go back to, and I believe I could be incorrect, but I do believe that I might be the first person of color to come out of Section 5 and represent Section 5 on the NIAAA board. I could be incorrect, but I believe that is correct. And so
I think that's right.
To wear that badge of honor is certainly something that I hold dear to my heart. So that's kind of the journey. And I did my absolute best to represent the section and also represent those folks that I represent from an at-large perspective. And so hopefully, walking away from this experience, all of those that I was representing would say, job well done. That's my ultimate hope.
And on the lighter side, I have to give a shout out to the famed Section 5 Mafia, of which I'm sure you're now a member, along with, well, I start with McGurk, but the list is obviously too long. But they've become famous in NIAAA circles.
Yeah. Well, I will say this, and Section 5 Mafia may get upset at me, but there was also the I-4 Mafia, and that's the Orange County Room. So, there may have to be a battle of mafias, of which I'm just going to excuse myself because I appreciate both mafias, right?
I love that. That is awesome. So while we're on the subject of speaking on the board, and I've said this numerous times when I've had board members on, I was fortunate enough to be on the board long before I met you way back in 2009, 10, and 11. And you try to put it into words and explain to people, but so few people get that opportunity, and so many people are really qualified to serve on the board. But I want to give you a chance maybe just to share maybe a couple of humorous experience, because as you know as well as I, each board is their own. You have 4 or 5 leave and you get 4 or 5 come on, and each board has their own unique opportunity. And like you said, before you know it, all of a sudden it's gone. So
Yeah.
maybe you got some board stories for us.
Oh, so the one that stands out, and I was not present, but I wish I had been. Um, there was an incident where apparently it came out that Greg Smith and Mike Mossbrucker of Indiana. So now, mind you, they're both from the same section. Greg Smith's from Wisconsin. Mike Mossbrucker is from Indiana. Um, and so apparently it came out that they both were wrestlers in high school. And I believe they both wrestled in college too. Don't quote me on that. And there was just this back and forth about those two if they ever wrestle. Mossbrucker's a heavyweight and Greg Smith is probably a junior lightweight or something. I don't know what the classifications are, but I can only imagine. And the last board meeting that Greg Smith was a board member, apparently he jumped. So the table was one where it was closed in. So it was a square. So we all sat on the outside of the
Right.
table. So the only way you could get in is either crawling underneath or going over the top. And somehow, I guess Mike Mossbrucker was in the inside of the square or the rectangle. And maybe he was plugging up his computer or whatever case may be. And rumor has it that Smith jumped over the table, lands on Mossbrucker's back, and proceeds to wrestle him in the middle of this rectangle or ring like, structure, if you will. And I just wish that we could have got that on film because I walked in on the tail end of it and you just had folks just cracking up laughing. And, they explained it the different ways that they explained it. But I wasn't present, but I was a part of a lot of the back and forth between those two, just in terms of their wrestling backgrounds and so forth. So if there's a story that stands out, it's definitely that one. And that's that board will that moment on the board will be one that I'll never forget. And I wasn't even present for it, so I can only imagine if I was present for it how that would have remained a staple in my mind.
That is incredible. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Let me have you share, Tony, your observations regarding the most recent conference. I say most recent because by the time this airs, it'll be almost a year since we were in Orlando. But Orlando, the second biggest conference after Nashville, and of course, you were on the board for both of those. Just give us observations about that conference you can share with our listeners.
Well, obviously, what I would say is that just the pure volume of attendees, right? Like that's very noticeable in the sense that, Orlando, we had, I believe, our second largest attendance record, so whatever the case may be. And so you could just see it. But, I think when you really dig into the details, I'll share this with you. Although I started as an athletic administrator in 2008, 2015 was my first conference. And if you remember, 2015 was in Orlando. So from my personal experience, able to navigate the conference, obviously a lot better than what I was able to in 2015. But for those that know me, most of you know that I am a champion of the underrepresented, right? And one of the observations that really stood out to me was the fact that there was a sense of the word I'm looking for is uh, enhanced relationship, if you will, between the underrepresented athletic administrators and the NIAAA. And where I'm going with that is, and I'm speaking about my own experience and some of the experiences of people that I'm pretty close to that look like me and come from the same background I do and so forth. But in 2015, I was, a wanderer, if you will, and just kind of, trying to get to the classes and trying to get to the workshops and so forth. And that was it. And really only attempted to connect or reconnect with the I-4 Mafia folks, right? That was really my aim. My aim wasn't to really connect with anyone else. And in 2023, I saw that there was, and there is a more concentrated effort focused on underrepresented athletic administrators and really providing platforms for those folks to feel, a sense of belonging to not only the conference, but to the organization as a whole. So when we look back to 2015, and again, just speaking through my lens and comparing that in terms of observations to 2023, I would say that we've come a long way in terms of being intentional about making all of the athletic administrators in attendance feel as though they belong to not only the conference but to the organization as a whole.
Thanks so much for sharing. We'll finish up with a couple of points as I do in all these podcasts. The first one being, Tony, I need your suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator, and they need to follow Tony's suggestions in order to become a success. What would your two suggestions be?
So again, most of the folks that know me know that I'm not going to give you a traditional answer of, get involved or link up with an experienced athletic administrator. And that's no knock on anyone that provides that, because I think that that is great advice. But the two suggestions that I would give to a new AD, wait out the storm if you can, because once the skies clear up, this profession is a very rewarding profession. And then suggestion number two, I think back to Frank Sinatra, right? I did it my way. So regardless of whether, I get pushed out or whether I'm burned out or I just decide to move away from the profession, I would give the advice of, if folks don't necessarily want the basketball benches to be on the north side of the gym and you prefer them to be on the south side and you have your reasonings for why they should be on the south side, do it your way, because at the end of the day, when you're done, I think you can look yourself in the eye and say, I did it my way, and I did it my way because I felt that that was the best for our student athletes, versus when you do it someone else's way and things are all said and done. Now you start to question, what if I would have did it this way? What if I would have stuck with my gut feeling or gut reaction? So those would be the two suggestions. Wait out the storm if you can, because this profession is a very rewarding profession. And then the second one is essentially to do it your way. I mean, obviously you want to vet it through folks and make sure that people are in support of the decisions that you're making. But there's no greater feeling than to walk away from a situation and say, hey, I feel good about that because I feel like I did the right thing and I was able to do it my way.
Love those suggestions. Thanks so much for sharing that. We'll finish with this. Tony, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
That's a tough one. I mean, but if I had to throw it out there, I would just, maybe say, some of the resources that are available, again, being a champion for the underrepresented athletic administrator, and for, just when we say underrepresented, that could mean, a plethora of different groups, right? But what I would say is, the resources that are available would be through organizations like NOMAD, which I'm a co-founding member of, which stands for the National Organization of Minority Athletic Directors, and or Global Community of Women. There's a ton of resources within those organizations that will help to educate, right? And I've always been a fan of, I don't like when people say, well, I didn't know, because I go back to my first year in Florida. The assistant director of compliance, her name was Natalie Strappy. She worked under DeNarvis Thornton, who was the director of compliance. I raised my hand. I was a first year AD in Florida, and she was writing notes on the board for the questions that were being asked. And I said, what happens if you're a brand new athletic director in the state of Florida and you just don't know? She wrote on the board ignorance. She went through her list of, her notes of the questions that were asked. And when she got to ignorance, and she said, for the gentleman who asked, what if you just don't know? She said, it's your job to know, and moved on to the next topic, right? So I always say, in this profession, we need to continue to educate ourselves in all facets of the job, right? And a part of that education, those two organizations help to prepare all athletic administrators for how to, appropriately support underrepresented student athletes, underrepresented athletic administrators, whatever the case may be. When we look at DEIB, you have diversity, you have equity, and you have belonging. But all three of those elements have to be present in order to have someone feel as though they are included, right? And that's where the DEIB comes from. And so we really have to educate ourselves on what is diversity and how can I, be better at diversifying my situation or my surrounding. We have to look at implementing equitable practices within our athletic programs. And then we have to create a sense of belonging, because I could be at the table, but if I don't feel like I belong at the table, then all the rest of it is for naught, right? And then that final piece, if we have those three elements, ultimately, I am going to feel included. And you are now exuding or displaying inclusive practices where I really don't have any other option but to feel included. So if there was a question that you failed to ask me, I think it would be that one.
Well, and thank you. On that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Tony Fisher, Certified Master Athletic Administrator and the District Director of Athletics at Minneapolis Public Schools, current member of the UIAAA Board. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast.
No, Hutch, thank you for the opportunity, and UIAAA, thank you for having me, the connection for having me on.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.